found at the watering hole show signs of being crushed. The answer? 8,000 pounds of Allosaurus actually stomped on them.
This was the site of one of the most gruesome and barbaric acts ever recorded in the fossil record. The bodies were piled on top of each other, and the earth literally ran red with blood. In order to keep from sinking into the mud, I think the Allosauruses were actually standing on their victims while they ripped them apart. And that's why so many of the bones were crushed and broken.
But if Allosaurus was the apex predator, why then were so many Allosaurus bones found in the lake bed? Investigators believe that while feeding, many of them became stuck themselves. But one question remained. Why would so many Allosaurus gather in the same place at the same time?
It's interesting that with Allosaurus, we find, in some cases, large accumulations of Allosaurus bone. And so when we see large accumulations, it makes us wonder what's going on. Did these animals live in large groups? We might even call them flocks, considering they're closely related to birds. Or were they together for some other reason? An interesting parallel that is compelling in many ways is what we see at the La Brea tar pits in California. Many of the fossils that we find there are of predatory animals, of wolves and predatory birds and things like that. La Brea tar pits we regard as a baited trap. Animals get stuck in there and the predators are lured in.
Hundreds of Allosaurus skeletons, but only a single Ceratosaurus. There is no doubt which predator ruled this Jurassic lake bed. Based on this new information, what does the evidence say happened when Allosaurus came on the scene?
First, we look at whatever evidence we do have, and then we look at the behavior of modern animals and apply that to those prehistoric creatures. By doing this, it gives us a realistic version of things with science to help back it up.
A trapped baby Stegosaurus is being eaten alive by the Ceratosaurus. The smell of fresh blood drifts downwind, perfectly in the path of a team of approaching Allosaurus.
These Allosaurus hunt in packs because it allows them to bring down much larger prey. They use their incredible sense of smell like a prehistoric homing device. Their keen sense of smell tells them that there's an adult and juvenile Stegosaurus about 100 yards ahead. But they also pick up the very distinct scent of a Ceratosaurus, and this is the hated enemy of Allosaurus.
One Allosaurus moves off to flank the unsuspecting Ceratosaurus. The remaining Allosaurus head towards the scene. The Ceratosaurus is outnumbered, and scientists now know it was also outsmarted.
It was sort of an earlier model meat eater. It doesn't have the more sophisticated brain that we see in some of its contemporaries like Allosaurus. So although it was pretty strong, it didn't have the claws, it didn't have the brains, and it also didn't have the size of some of the other giant meat eaters of its environment.
It's a face-off, one that's about to see a colossal monster join the fight. A single Ceratosaurus faces off against two Allosaurus. The prize? A helpless Stegosaurus and her young. From the top of the food chain, Allosaurus goes into killing mode.
If he's up against somebody bigger, Allosaurus is going to be cautious. He's going to stand back. He's going to really size up the prey, and he's going to focus on his adversary's weak points. If he's fighting somebody smaller, the battle changes. Now he's interested in rushing in and beating the crud out of his opponent. I don't care about weighing your strengths and weaknesses, brother. I'm bigger than you. I'll rip your head off.
There's a new clue. Scientists have found Allosaurus bones around the world. They all show signs of serious trauma. We know this dinosaur was hardwired to kill or be killed.
There's been a lot of Allosaurus specimens found that have wounds on them, damage from having their foot crushed by another dinosaur, or holes punctured in their tail from the spikes of a Stegosaurus. But these are healed wounds. These dinosaurs survived these attacks long enough for the bones to heal over. They lived in tough times, but they were tough, and they could take it.
Having identified their adversary, the Allosaurus moved down the hill towards their intended target.
Allosaurus are cooperative hunters, so as two of them move down to take on their adversary head-on, the third moves off in a different direction in an effort to outflank the Ceratosaurus. We see this sort of ambush maneuver in modern lions and sometimes wolves. If you can keep your opponent's attention focused in one direction, it allows for a surprise attack from the other.
One of them takes advantage of the Stegosaur's vulnerable position and uses him as a platform. The Ceratosaurus begins to move away from the Stegosaurus. With the force of a runaway freight train, the third Allosaurus crushes the unsuspecting Ceratosaurus. We now know that some Stegosaurs could have as many as 8 spikes on their tail.
The massive weight on the female Stegosaurus causes her body to lean forward. This frees her tail. The moment she feels her tails become free, she swings it with every bit of remaining energy she has, and it lands a direct hit.
The location of the bones tells the story. One Allosaurus is down. A few steps away, the body of the Ceratosaurus lays motionless. A Stegosaurus struggles to free herself from the jaws of this relentless, muddy tomb. Next to her, the lifeless body of her offspring. 100 yards away, another dinosaur comes to the lake bed.
A family of Camarasaurus moves down to the lake bed. Leading them is a huge male. Its sheer size is enough to deter almost any attacker. The Allosaurus are now faced with a difficult choice. Do they continue their attack on the Stegosaurus, or do they dare take on something as huge as a Camarasaurus?
I would say that under normal circumstances, a Camarasaurus was such a big animal that it didn't really have to worry about attack very often. We certainly know that sometimes they get stuck in the mud. And in a situation like that, if it's isolated from the rest of the herd, Allosaurus may have taken a chance.
Allosaurus was built to move at a good pace compared to other dinosaurs. Some experts estimate they could run as fast as 20 miles an hour, but the Camarasaurus could have been 150 years old. It wouldn't have moved as quickly.
We can look at the skeletal structure of Allosaurus and see it was a fairly capable moving animal. We can even go beyond that, though, and look inside the head to look at the inner ear. What we see in Allosaurus is the agility of a predator. When we look at the inner ear of Camarasaurus, what we see is an animal that moves very slowly in a very stately manner. This is an animal for whom quick movements were not particularly important for this animal. So Allosaurus was a relatively fast-moving, agile animal. Camarasaurus potentially could have just stood still and faced the music.
Allosaurus had a very bird-like stance. Having their legs designed like an ostrich is what gives these dinosaurs their ability to run so quickly. And like a cheetah, they use their long tail as a counterbalance to help them change directions when they're running at top speed. It's the combination of these features that allows Allosaurus to grow huge, yet move like a sprinter. Camarasaurus, on the other hand, is built like an elephant. But when you're that big, you aren't in much of a hurry to get to where you're going anyway.
In fact, a giant species of Allosaurus grew to an even greater size than its cousin, T-Rex.
When you look at Camarasaurus and you look at Allosaurus, the weapons of Allosaurus are a lot more obvious. Allosaurus has blade-like serrated teeth in its powerful jaws. It's got these eagle-like talons at the ends of these powerful arms. But don't discount Camarasaurus here. It has its size, and size is a great weapon. On top of that, it's got a very long, broad tail, which you could use to swat at an attacker.
CAT scans show that Allosaurus was able to strategize more than the enormous monster.
We can also look at the brain and see differences there too. When we look at the brain of Allosaurus, what we see is some enlargement of the forebrain, the cerebrum. On the other hand, in Camarasaurus, we see a very small brain, and in particular the cerebrum, that same center of higher functions, is really quite small. What that suggests is that in the heat of battle, the slightly larger brain size of what we see in Allosaurus would have potentially allowed it to, in a sense, adapt to the changing battle situation. With Camarasaurus, it's operating purely by instinct.
Experts now know that the Camarasaurus would have sent out a distress call, which Allosaurus would pick up and recognize immediately. With the CAT scan evidence and unprecedented insight into predatory dinosaur behavior,